Welcome to The Explainer. Listen, today we're going way beyond simple productivity hacks. We are going to architect a low-pass filter for your intellect. If you've ever felt like your brain is running 1,000 tabs at once and you just can't think straight, well, this one's for you. Let's dive in.
I know that sounds a little dramatic, right? But just think about it for a second. It's all those half-read articles, those unfinished books, all the videos you saved for later that you know you're never going to watch. It's a graveyard of good intentions and completely fractured attention.
So in this first part, we're going to put a name to this feeling. We're going to diagnose exactly what's causing that persistent, heavy brain fog you're walking around with.
Here's the core issue. Your problem isn't a lack of information. It's that you have way too much. And there's a name for this state, cognitive satiety. See, for a mind like yours, one that processes the world in such high resolution, information is basically a drug. And an overdose doesn't lead to more knowledge. It just leads to this chronic, overwhelming feeling that you can't think clearly.
And this right here, this is the central conflict. Your brain has been so flooded with information that it has literally lost the ability to tell the difference between these two things. Everything feels kind of important, which means nothing actually is. You know that physical weight you feel in your head after a day of so-called research? That's a real thing. It's the metabolic price you pay for trying to file absolute garbage into a high-security vault.
All right, let's build on that, because I want to give you a whole new way to frame this problem. And this is crucial. This is not a personal failure. It's not about you lacking discipline. It is a technical problem.
Society, and maybe even you, might look at this brain fog and say, you're just unfocused. You need a new planner. But that completely misses the point. The truth is, you aren't unfocused, you are over-attuned. Because your brain records the world in what you could call stunning 8K. Every little notification, every random fact, every minor detail gets treated like a top priority alert.
To really get this, we can borrow a concept straight from engineering, the signal-to-noise ratio. Think of it like tuning an old radio. A high ratio means you hear the music crystal clear, but a low ratio, it's just deafening static. Right now, your brain is drowning in that static. It's experiencing a massive failure in its signal-to-noise ratio.
So for minds that operate in this kind of high def, the mental filter that's supposed to weed out the junk is, well, it's leaky. It doesn't just let the noise in, it actually amplifies it right alongside the important signal. So when you check your phone for just a second, your brain doesn't just see a notification, it launches an entire high-res simulation for it, shattering your focus into a million pieces. And this illustrates the cost perfectly. Every single time you switch your focus, you pay what's called a context-switching tax. And I want to be clear, this is not a metaphor. You are paying a real biological tax, depleting your dopamine reserves. It's no wonder that by the time you get back to the actual signal, the important work, your brain is just too exhausted to do anything with it.
Okay, so that's the diagnosis, that's the problem. So now what do we do about it? Let's talk about the solution. And it all begins with a huge shift in how you think about your own mind. So, how do you do it? How do you actually reclaim that precious crystal clarity in a world that seems designed to destroy it? Well, the secret isn't about finding clarity. It's about protecting it by being absolutely ruthless in eliminating the non-essential.
I want you to reframe your mind using these two models. Right now, most of us treat our brain like a messy storage warehouse. We just hoard everything, thinking that knowing more stuff makes us smarter. It doesn't. It just creates a graveyard. What we need is to start treating our minds like an architectural library, carefully curated, everything there for a specific purpose, knowing there's only a tiny bit of space on that golden shelf of conscious attention. And the main tool for curating that library is something called strategic ignorance. I know it sounds wrong, but it's the smartest thing you can do. It's not about being uninformed, it's the exact opposite. It's about consciously giving yourself permission to not know all the endless interesting noise so that you can go incredibly deep on the essential signal. You aren't losing information, you are gaining resolution.
Okay, theory's great, but let's make this practical. This last section is all about action. It's a framework you can start using today. This is the signal protocol.
Here it is, just 3 simple but incredibly powerful steps. Number 1, the 3-node limit. Every single morning, before you touch any screen, you identify the 3 and only 3 essential signals for your day. Everything else, it's just noise. Number 2, information fasting. For the first 2 hours of your day, no external input, no news, no email, no social media. Let your own signal emerge for once. And finally, number 3, the low-pass audit.
When you're in a research rabbit hole, just stop and ask, is this information a load-bearing wall for my project, or is it just aesthetic wallpaper? If it's wallpaper, be ruthless. Close the tab.
And here's a tool you can use right in the middle of that feeling of overwhelm. Just stop. And I want you to literally say this out loud. This is a low signal-to-noise state. I am currently over-amplifying the noise. I know it sounds simple, but the act of just labeling the static like that pulls you out of the chaos. It puts you back in the role of the observer, the one who's in control.
Look, ultimately, your job is not to know everything. Your job is to see the one thing that truly matters. So stop building a warehouse for digital and mental garbage. Start architecting a temple for the truth. So I'll leave you with this. What is the one signal you need to focus on today?
Do you ever feel like you're just drowning in information? You know, you're reading all the articles, saving all the videos, but you're still left with this persistent brain fog? Well, you are definitely not alone. In this explainer, we're going to dive into what's causing that feeling, and more importantly, what you can actually do to find some clarity. Wow, that hits hard, doesn't it? This is such a powerful way to start. The idea here is that our digital life, and even our mental space, is just cluttered with the ghosts of good intentions. Think about all those saved articles, those complex ideas you were going to get to. It's all just sitting there. It's a graveyard of information, and honestly, it's exhausting. And this is the central paradox we're tackling today, isn't it? We have the entire world's knowledge right at our fingertips. So why do so many of us feel more confused and less clear than ever before? Well, the answer isn't that you're failing. It's that your mind might just be a little too powerful for the world we live in today. So let's totally reframe this feeling. This isn't some personal weakness or a lack of discipline. Nope. It's actually a side effect of having a mind that's trying to record the world in glorious 8K. We're going to call it the high-resolution curse. See, the problem isn't that you can't focus, it's the opposite. You're over-attuned. You've hit this state called cognitive satiation. It's like you've consumed so much information that your brain has literally lost its ability to tell the difference between something that's genuinely important and something that's just kind of interesting. It all just blends together into this big gray mush, which is why making any decision feels impossible. Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty of this using a really simple but I think a really powerful analogy. To truly understand what's happening inside your head, I want you to start thinking of your brain as a highly sophisticated, very sensitive radio receiver. Now, in communications engineering, there's this fundamental concept called the signal-to-noise ratio, or SNR. It's everything. A high ratio means you hear the music perfectly clear. A low ratio, all you get is that awful static. Well, guess what? Your brain operates on this exact same principle, always trying to find that clear signal in a deafening roar of noise. So the part of your brain that's acting as this radio tuner is your thalamic gating system. You can think of it as your brain's internal gain control knob. It's constantly making decisions about which signals from the outside world get amplified and which ones get turned way, way down. It's your brain's natural filter. And this is where it gets really interesting. This slide breaks down two different kinds of mental wiring. On one side, you have the dandelion brain. Its gain control is set to low, so it naturally filters out most of the irrelevant stuff. But then there's the orchid brain. This is the high-resolution mind. Its gain is cranked to maximum, and this creates what some neuroscientists call a leaky filter. It amplifies everything, both the important signals and all the distracting noise. Okay, so what's the real-world cost of having this high-gain, leaky filter? I mean, in our hyper-connected, notification-driven world, it's a really heavy price to pay. And that cost comes in the form of something called attention fragmentation. When you have that leaky filter and you check your phone just for a second, your brain doesn't just see a notification. Oh no, it opens up an entirely new, high-resolution mental simulation just for that one little piece of information. It literally splits your focus into tiny, ineffective pieces. And this slide shows that vicious cycle in action, step by step. Every single time you switch your focus, you are paying a biological context-switching tax. This literally depletes your dopamine reserves, and that's the very chemical that helps you stay motivated and focused. So by the time you finally get back to your main task, the actual signal, your brain is just too drained to properly engage with it. So the crucial point here is this. That feeling of brain fog isn't just in your head. It's not just a mood. It is a real metabolic cost. It's your brain's biological protest against being forced to process and host an endless stream of low-quality, noisy data. So, we've diagnosed the problem. Now, what do we do about it? How do we fix it? Well, the solution requires a really fundamental mindset shift in how we approach information itself. We have to stop being hoarders and start being architects. This slide really lays out the two paths you can take. You've got the warehouse mindset, which tries to store absolutely everything. It values knowing everything. And the result is that graveyard of facts we talked about. But then there's the architectural library mindset, and this is totally different. This is all about curation. It's about valuing understanding the one thing and carefully building a temple for the truth. You know, this is really just the classic 80-20 rule, Pareto's law, but applied to our intellect. Real clarity comes from that moment you realize that roughly 80% of the data we consume is just interesting noise. The real leverage, the deep understanding, comes from identifying and focusing only on that 20% that is the truly essential signal. And this leads us to a really powerful and maybe a little counterintuitive idea: strategic ignorance. For a high-resolution mind, an undisciplined curiosity is actually a liability. You have to consciously give yourself permission not to know about most things so you can free up those massive cognitive resources you need to deeply know the things that actually matter. All right, let's get practical. How do we actually build this architectural library and protect our clarity? Well, we can implement a simple but really effective framework called the Signal Protocol. Here are 4 simple rules you can start using today. First, the 3-node limit. Just focus on 3 essential signals each day. That's it. This alone prevents fragmentation. Next, try information fasting. No input, no news, no social media, no email for the first 2 hours of your day. This lets your own original thoughts finally surface. Then there's the low-pass audit. Constantly ask yourself, is this information a load-bearing wall or is it just wallpaper? Discern the structural from the decorative. And finally, label the static. When you feel that overwhelm creeping in, just say out loud, this is a low signal state. Just naming it helps you regain perspective and control. And that right there is the final crucial takeaway. Clarity isn't some destination you just stumble upon. It's a sanctuary that you have to build and defend every single day. It's a continuous process of protecting your focus by aggressively, unapologetically eliminating the non-essential. The moment you truly start protecting your signal, that's when the fog finally begins to lift. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to tackle brain fog, but not by just, organizing it better. We're talking about getting rid of it entirely. We're going to dive into how you can stop treating your mind like some messy, overstuffed storage warehouse and start redesigning it into a beautiful architectural library that's literally built for clarity. So let's just start with this idea from our source material. It's pretty provocative. It argues that your mind right now isn't some treasure chest of knowledge. No, it's a graveyard. And it's filled with the ghosts of half-read articles, all those bookmarked videos you swore you'd watch, and brilliant ideas that, well, you just never got back to. If you constantly feel overwhelmed by all the information flying at you, listen up. The source material suggests this isn't some personal flaw. It's actually a side effect of one of your core strengths. Your mind is so powerful, it's actually getting in its own way. Okay, so let's properly diagnose this problem. The source has a name for it, the high-resolution curse. It's this paradox where your mind's greatest strength, its ability to see absolutely everything in stunning detail, becomes its biggest weakness. And here's the technical term for it, cognitive satiety. It's that point where you've taken in so much information that you literally can't tell the difference between what's just interesting and what is truly essential. You keep thinking more data equals more wisdom, but really, you're just filling your mental warehouse with more and more junk. I mean, this just captures the whole idea perfectly, right? You're not unfocused, you're over-attuned. Your 8K brain is like a super-sensitive, high-fidelity antenna that's picking up 1,000 radio stations at the exact same time, and it's treating every little bit of static like it's the main broadcast. Okay, so let's get into the mechanics of it. Why does this actually happen? Well, the answer is in the neurobiology of how our brains are supposed to filter information, or in this case, how they fail to filter it. So in engineering, there's this concept called the signal-to-noise ratio. A high ratio, that means your message is crystal clear. A low one means it's totally lost in all the static. Well, guess what? Your brain operates on this exact same principle. It's constantly trying to find the signal in the noise. So these high-resolution minds, they're like a super sensitive microphone with the gain setting cranked all the way up to maximum. You amplify everything, the important signal for sure, but also all the background noise. This is what the source calls a leaky filter. Now here's where it gets really interesting, the metabolic cost. Every single time your leaky filter lets you switch your focus, you pay what's called a context switching tax. And as you can see here, this just drains your mental energy and your dopamine reserves, leaving you way too exhausted to focus on the essential signal, even if you finally find it. So if the problem is the mental model itself, then the only solution is to change it. We need a complete and total paradigm shift. It's time to move from that warehouse mindset to a library mindset. And this right here illustrates the central idea brilliantly. Stop treating your mind like a messy warehouse where you just dump everything and hope for the best. Instead, start curating it like a beautiful architectural library where every single item has a purpose, a reason for being there, and its own special place. In this new library model of yours, your conscious attention is the most valuable real estate you have. It's the golden shelf, and it's reserved only for the most essential, the most load-bearing ideas, the ones that support your entire mental structure. Everything else, it doesn't even make it past the front door. Okay, let's talk about the philosophy behind curating this library, because it requires a pretty radical act, something we're really not taught to do: strategic and purposeful ignoring. This is basically Pareto's law, the 80-20 rule applied directly to your intellect. Real clarity comes from actively ignoring the 80% of data that is merely interesting, so you can focus intensely on the 20% that is truly essential. That's the 20% that moves the entire system. This is called strategic ignorance. And let's be clear, it's not about being uninformed. It's about making a conscious decision not to know about all the world's noise so you can free up that precious bandwidth to deeply know the signal that actually matters to your core mission. You're not losing information here. You're gaining resolution. For a really powerful mind, undisciplined curiosity can be a huge liability. It's what leads you down all those rabbit holes that just don't matter. The real power move is giving yourself this permission, the permission to not know. Okay, this is fantastic in theory, right? But how do we actually put this into practice? Let's turn this entire philosophy into a concrete daily protocol that you can start using like right now. Here it is, the 4-step signal protocol. Number 1, the 3-node limit. Every day, you identify only 3 essential signals or golden nodes to focus on. That's it, just 3. 2, information fasting. You've got to protect your peak morning focus, so that means no external inputs for the first 2 hours of your day. 3, the low-pass audit. Constantly ask yourself, is this piece of information a load-bearing wall that supports my goals, or is it just wallpaper? And finally, number 4, label the static. When you feel that brain fog creeping back in, just acknowledge it. Simply naming the state of low signal to noise helps you regain control. When you actually implement this protocol, something fundamental really begins to shift. You stop being a passive consumer of endless noise, and you become an active, intentional architect of signal. This is the first half of your new identity. It's all about subtraction. You consciously let go of that old data hoarding model. You are no longer building a cluttered warehouse, because you now realize that more stuff doesn't make you smarter. It just makes you slower. And this is the second, much more powerful half, creation. You are now a deliberate architect. You're not just storing information anymore. You're building a temple or a library, a mental space designed from the ground up for truth, for clarity, and for deep, meaningful focus. So to make all of this real, let's end this explainer with a question that brings it all right back to you. After everything we've just talked about, what is the one single essential signal that truly matters to you today?
Ever feel like the world is just shouting at you from a million different directions? How do you possibly find the one voice, the one thing that actually matters? Well, today, we're diving into a really powerful framework designed to do just that. It's called the Signal Protocol.
You know that feeling, right? That constant brain fog when you feel completely overwhelmed, not because you're lacking information, but because you have way too much of it? If that sounds familiar, this explainer is definitely for you. We're going to tackle that feeling of mental static head on.
Well, that's a heavy statement, isn't it? But this graveyard, it's not some spooky physical place. No, it's that digital landscape we've all built,
cluttered with those half-read articles, the books we started but never finished, and all those videos we saved for later. It's the price we pay for our addiction to information.
And believe it or not, there's actually a name for this feeling: cognitive satiety. It's the point where your brain is just so full, so saturated, that it literally loses the ability to tell the difference between what's truly essential and what's just kind of interesting. It's not a personal failure, it's just a state of being completely full.
Okay, so here's where we flip the script. The source for this argues that this feeling of being overwhelmed, it isn't your fault. It's not a personal failing. It's a structural one. You're not unfocused. You might actually be the opposite. You're over-attuned, trying to listen to everything at once.
And this slide really nails the diagnosis. Society tells us, oh, you're just unfocused, or you need to be more organized. But the real issue, it's a structural signal-to-noise failure. Think of your mind as this incredible high-fidelity antenna, but you're picking up 1,000 radio stations all at the same time. All you're going to get is deafening static. And this concept comes straight from science and engineering. It's the signal-to-noise ratio. A high ratio means the message, the signal, is crystal clear. A low ratio, well, the message gets totally lost in all the background chatter. And for so many of us right now, the noise is just completely drowning out the signal.
This problem is especially tough for people with what the source calls high-resolution minds. Imagine your brain is a camera that records the world in stunning 8K detail. The good news, you see everything vividly. The bad news, it amplifies the noise right along with the signal. And every single time you switch your focus, you pay this context-switching tax that just drains your mental energy, leaving you totally exhausted. So here's the crucial point. Clarity isn't something you find hiding in a pile of data. It's something you have to actively protect. And you do that by aggressively, even ruthlessly, eliminating whatever doesn't matter. This requires a whole new mindset.
And I absolutely love this philosophy. It's the warehouse mindset versus the architect mindset. The warehouse just collects junk, indiscriminately storing everything that seems interesting. But the architect curates. They build with purpose. They design a library with a very small, very exclusive golden shelf, reserved only for the most essential truths.
Now, this is such a critical insight. We're always taught that curiosity is this amazing virtue, and it is. But when it's undisciplined, it can actually become a huge liability. It leads to what's called cognitive drift, where you end up becoming an expert on 1,000 little things that have absolutely nothing to do with your main mission.
So what's the solution? It's pretty radical. Adopt strategic ignorance. Now, this isn't about being uninformed. It's about giving yourself permission to intentionally ignore the noise. By doing that, you're not losing information. You're gaining this incredible high-definition resolution on what actually truly matters.
Okay, so this all sounds great in theory, right? But how do we actually do it? How do we put this philosophy into practice and reclaim our clarity? That, my friends, is where the Signal Protocol comes in. It's a 4-part framework designed specifically to help you see through the fog. Here it is, 4 simple but incredibly powerful steps. This is the architectural framework for anyone who wants to become a sentinel of their own attention. First up, the 3-node limit. Every morning, before you even look at a screen, you identify your 3 golden nodes, the 3 absolutely essential signals for the day. That's it, just 3. Anything else is noise. This forces a brutal kind of prioritization. And get this, if a 4th task tries to sneak in, it has to be important enough to kill one of the original 3 to earn its spot. Second, information fasting. I challenge you to try this for the next 7 days. For the first 2 hours of your day, absolutely zero external input. No news, no social media, no podcasts. This creates this pocket of mental silence, allowing your brain to generate its own signal before the world's noise tries to install its bloatware on your system.
Third is the low-pass audit. When you're stuck in one of those endless research loops, 20 tabs open, stop, and ask yourself this question. Is this piece of information a load-bearing wall, meaning is it structurally essential, or is it just aesthetic wallpaper? If it's just wallpaper, close the tab. Protect your mental RAM and reclaim that energy instantly.
And finally, labeling the static. This is so simple, but it's profound. When you feel that overwhelm creeping in, just say this phrase out loud. This is a low signal-to-noise state. I am currently over-amplifying the noise. That simple act shifts you from being a victim of the noise to becoming the calm, detached observer of it.
Ultimately, this whole protocol, it isn't just a set of productivity hacks. It's about fundamentally changing your identity. It's about stepping into a new role, the sentinel. And this is the core mindset shift right here. You're no longer a passive consumer hoarding digital garbage. You become an active architect, designing a mental temple for what is true and what is essential. Your job is to see the one thing that matters.
Your true role is to be the sentinel, the observer who can cut right through the static. This framework is the tool that lets you finally find your signal. The only question left is, what signal are you going to choose to amplify?